You're welcome to another episode of Just Getting Started, and today's guest is a fascinating individual. He's Greg Garrett. I'm not even quite sure where he lives at this stage, but he's going to tell us all about his story. So let me see if I can just set the table here and tell you how today's interview came about. So Greg and I are very fortunate to be part of a community on school.com, which we'll go into a little bit later. And we've got to know each other a little bit over the last few months. And I must say that I've been intrigued by this person since day one. He's got an amazing transformation story to tell. He's got a huge history in the corporate world, and he's transitioned to other things which will become apparent during the course of this discussion. And I just can't tell you how excited I am to get stuck into this conversation. So Greg Garrett, you are welcome, and tell us who you are and where you're calling from today.
So thank you. Yeah, I'm a next door neighbour to the Irish from Liverpool, and was my mother's maiden name was Mahon or Marn, depending on which side of the water you're on.
Yeah.
And so I've lived in Liverpool for a large portion of my life. I was then sent off to boarding school because my mother wanted a Catholic priest, just to divide audiences, and she didn't get her wish. I then found the corporate world and started to dive into that, which Nikki and I are going to share with you. But right now I live in the beautiful English Lake District. I'm overlooking Lake Windermere, sat on a hillside, which is famed. If any of you know the Wainwright walks, Wainwright wrote all the books for the walks. Well, the walk that I live on, it isn't actually in the books, but it's the one that he did when he first got off the bus, when he came up to the Lake District. And he got to the top, saw the view, and he fell in love with it. And I live part way up the climb. You could say I'm hiding, or you could say I'm retreating. I don't mind.
Yeah. All right, so let's get a couple of things out of the way first, right? You're a Liverpool supporter. I'm a Manchester United supporter. We've had great. How would I call it? We had a great tit for tat over the last few months, and I think we're just prepared to say that it's neck and neck at the moment, right?
Well, I think you could see it that way. I mean, if I had your league position, I probably wouldn't even be bringing it up if I'd won at the weekend. And I'd also be asking myself, right, who's playing Champions League football this week and who isn't? There's just deeper questions that take us beyond one particular result. But it was good to see your players celebrate like they'd won the Champions League, because it's probably the only thing they're going to win this season. But I think we should be done with football now.
just park that one, right? Can you just go back to? I was a little bit distracted. Just go back to where you are. Are you in the Windermere region? Is that where you are?
I'm in Windermere. Yeah, overlooking Lake Windermere.
Yeah, lovely. So we're talking Peter Rabbit country up there as well, aren't we?
You are talking, if you're into rabbits, Peter Rabbit, yeah.
Yeah. And who was the famous writer? There was another writer that was
William Wordsworth.
William Wordsworth, yes. Tulips, yeah.
Daffodils, even.
Daffodils, yeah. I wandered lonely as a cloud. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got me.
Yeah.
So not only is this a thrilling podcast, but it's also a lesson in history and and English.
Yeah.
So
Miss Potter was the writer of Peter Rabbit.
That's right. That's the one I was trying to think of. So thank you for that. Great. So Greg, I think probably starting at the start is a very good place to start, if that's okay with you. So growing up in Lancashire, and what was that like? Tell me about your family, the major influences in your life, or the major influers in your life that led you to the path that you were on from a career point of view.
Yeah, so one of 5 children, 3 girls, myself and my brother. Very much I'd say, traditional Roman Catholic family in the area at the time. People did still attend church on a Sunday at that point as families. And I was very much an outdoors guy. So I lived right on the docks. So I would go fishing in the docks. I love playing football. So I would, or for our American listeners, soccer. And also then my main game was rugby. I played rugby till I was 35. And so I enjoyed ball sports, if you like. At the age of 11, I mentioned earlier, my mum decided she wanted a priest. So she sent me off to boarding school, partly to do with the fact I wasn't the best behaved child. I would run wild. And then another interesting fact, I was taught by Christian brothers who haven't got 1 ounce of Christianity in them. And they, so I was, some people would say I was brought up, others would say I was dragged up. I would say I was beaten up, certainly in the school system. And, they were particularly ruthless, which probably forms part of, will naturally form a large part of who I am today. So I was sent from the tutelage of the Christian Brothers to be taught by the Catholic Church at a place called Upholland College, which is just outside of Wigan, which people probably know more for the rugby league team than anything else. And spent 3 years there. I did enjoy the college. And then after 3 years, I moved back to Liverpool and went to the school that I'd gone to up till the age of 10. And then was taught again by the Christian Brothers, but predominantly went to the school, if I'm honest, to play rugby. That was...
Are you talking rugby league or rugby union?
Union. Played union. Yeah,
union,
not to
okay.
confuse the codes.
Yeah.
But I had an advantage that I was... By the time I was 11, I was nearly 6 foot. And I've never grown since, which was quite funny, but I was extremely well built. And some schools would even say, look, we'll play against you, but you can't bring the big guy. And so, which is quite funny looking back on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And were you an aggressive player, or were you one of the big passive forwards that just drove through the defence? And
no, I was fast. So I qualified for the English schools at running 400 metres. So I was quick over the ground, and I was aggressive, which is why then teams wouldn't want me to play against them. But then by the time I was 16, everyone had grown up height wise, and I'd then grown out as opposed to growing up.
Tell me about the so there's an interesting twist here already, because you've said that you grew up in a very Catholic and kind of an Irish influenced culture, and yet you went to play rugby, which wouldn't have been the natural sport to play for Irish Catholics, would it? So was there some pushback to your sporting proclivities at that time, or was it a natural thing for you just to join the rugby club?
Yeah, so my uncle played fly half for Waterloo, which at the time were a top tier side. So my grandmother would take me to watch every week, and we'd sit in the stand and with a flask of tea, and and watch the game. And I think therefore it was inbuilt into me. But I was blessed to be a rugby player, but also I was a good soccer player. No, never good enough to, but in terms of the levels that I played at, enjoyed the game, and would always get a game. But it was my uncle's influence and my grandmother that really led me down the rugby channel.
Okay, and if I may just go back to the soccer, I know we said we wouldn't talk about soccer anymore, but you've just reminded me of a fantastic story. I used to work in Manchester for the Kellogg company many centuries ago, and I had a great friend called Pete who was from Liverpool, and obviously there was the huge Liverpool versus Everton rivalry going on in the city, and he was a Liverpool supporter, and he used to go to the games with his dad on the bus every Saturday or every second Saturday, right? And as they were passing by Goodison Park, which is the old Everton ground, his father used to instruct him to hold their noses. So every time they'd be passing by Goodison Park, the whole bus would just hold their noses like this. So brilliant. Did you experience great stories like that
Yeah,
in
I
terms of the
mean
rivalry?
the divide, even at school, you'd have probably 25% of the school year would be Evertonians and 75% would be Liverpudlians. But I think eras really matter, because it influences then how many of the boys become Liverpool fans and how many of the boys become
Yes.
Everton fans. But you can
Gotcha.
also see the ones that are Evertonians are they're more anti-establishment. You'd say, they're more. So there was always that was a point of interest, and then you've just got eternal banter, where there would be forever banter in the differences between all the songs that would be sung, which weren't in the least bit nice about the way other teams were seen. But a strange thing for me, which I think is balance, is I had a girlfriend around the age of 15, and her family had season tickets at Goodison. Now, that was at the time when it was Andy Gray, Gary Lineker, Neville Southall.
Oh wow.
So I got to watch all of that. And so I do have a soft spot for Everton. In fact, which makes me somewhat different, is I enjoy good football. So I can watch a good match. And yes, I have got a love for Liverpool. But, I won't miss a meal because of it, or it won't keep me up at night, or it's more of an enjoyment. And I do enjoy the banter, if someone's a United fan or an Evertonian. So.
Yeah, you'll give it lots, yeah. And rounding out that piece about living in an Irish influenced region or city, for those who are not familiar with the history, of course, a huge amount of Irish people went to seek their living and seek their fortune in Liverpool, and there's a massive Irish community there. Was it very evident growing up, or was the Irish community a subset of the overall community there? How was the Irish community perceived in Liverpool?
Yeah, it was totally integrated. There'd be no separation at all, at least through my eyes. And my grandfather was a member of Parliament. My great uncle was a member of Parliament. My great grandfather was a member of Parliament. So I was brought up as well. It's sort of like it misses a generation, and then there's my generation. So my mum's generation, if you like, there was high hopes for family members to go into politics. I don't know why you use the term high hopes and politics in the same sentence, but they some would have you believe that they go together. So the Irish influence. We every Sunday we would go to the Irish Centre in Liverpool, just by the Catholic Cathedral, just by Paddy's Wigwam, and we'd do Irish dancing and have a ceilidh, and that was the way that we were brought up. And then another just interesting twist: my uncle was one of the first people to be into the assassination of JFK. And we actually toured Ireland. I can't remember which anniversary it was, and we went round Ireland from different town to town, city to city, doing talks on the assassination of JFK. And he had a copy of the original Zabruda film, which was the little. I don't remember how many millimeter the film was, but we had the original, and and we go round and we play it. And so,
So, so just to be clear on that, when you say your uncle was the first, did you say he was one of the first on the scene? Is that what you said?
no, not on the scene, but he was fascinated with the whole. He
Ah,
was fascinated with the whole JFK lineage, the political dynasty. So if you like,
okay.
we've got a political family, and then you've got the political family in the form of the Kennedys. And he actually went out to the States many years after the assassination and found himself in Dallas. And then whilst in Dallas, was introduced to someone who said, would you like to buy a copy of the original Zabruda film?
Yes.
And, so he bought that and brought it back. And these are just like little anecdotal stories that
What a
maybe
thing.
give
What
a
a thing to have,
flavour
yeah.
to the type of upbringing that
Yeah.
I enjoyed.
You spoke less than favorably about your Christian brother's education, and we all know, and there's probably no need to rehash the things that have been uncovered in the last number of years around abuse in the Catholic Church and so on. You talked about the situation being brutal. Do you have any specific incidents, without breaking any confidences, that you want to talk about, or do you just want to keep it general there?
No, I think it's good to highlight some of the incidences because it makes it clear. Daily, the school I went to, you would be brought. They do times tables first thing in the morning. And I look back now, I couldn't read till I was 11. So there's me, a kid at a private school, and I can't read. Why? Because I'm petrified. And even though I'm a big kid, every morning I get up, my stomach could be churning. It's like, oh my God, no, I've got to go into this torture again. And so when I look back on it, it's interesting because I can see it on a number of levels now. One level is the absolute stupidity and ignorance of these people who shouldn't be called, certainly, shouldn't be called Christian brothers, probably shouldn't be called human beings, because to think that that is the only way to educate, to nurture, to help someone grow, and especially when they're supposedly reading the teachings of Christ, it's like a great yogi, a great prophet. It's like, come on, how do you piece these two things together? Where's the passage that says, beat the children as hard and as often as you can in order to get them to learn and to grow up. So whereas I'm also into many lifetimes, many masters now, having studied lots of different lineages, and I do believe we have our own karmic inheritance, and this is then going to be much harder on some people, me saying this. It highlights, so I've met some incredible people on my journey, or went and found them, and someone who could see past lives. And I remember it stood out to me, someone asked him a question. They said, well, why don't we see our past lives? And he just turned and looked at them and said, let me tell you, you do not want to see your past lives. And
What do you say to... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to finish that, the idea is that the only point at which you will be able to see them, if you're into, this many lifetimes idea, is at the point that you've developed sufficient love and compassion for yourself and others. Because if you're not at that point, you would not be able to process it.
Okay. What do you say to the people who subscribe to the notion that the Christian brothers and people of their ilk were merely puppets or a product of the environment that they were brought up and developed in? And how do we separate the people from their behaviors? Because the people are not necessarily their behaviors. In other words, yes, let's identify the behaviors and make judgment on those, but they're not representative of the people that lurk within.
Yeah, so a very important notion is that it's a process. And one of the things that we can realize when we get that it's a process is that we can only start where we're at, the reality of where we're at, need to look at it no matter how hard, tough, ugly, whatever that is that's there, we just need to look straight at. And then we can begin to take steps from where we are, as the saying goes, to where we want to be or where we choose to be. And to go on that journey then requires bravery and courage. And someone once said to me, Greg, because you'll hear this around all the time, not just about Christian brothers, priests and whatever. You hear now it's rippled out to toxic men. Men are toxic men. And this person said to me, very high person, said, Greg, there are no toxic men. And you're a bit like, you frown and you lean in. There are simply unconscious men. And when we allow ourselves to be in that space of, I see an unconscious man, whether it's a priest, a Christian brother, or just any other man who's behaving in ways that we could say he's fallen asleep to who he is. He's been indoctrinated. He's swallowed dogmas whole. However he's managed to get himself there, he has gotten himself into that spot. And ultimately, he's going to have to get himself out. That's the journey.
Yeah.
Yet in getting himself out, we have to realize it's a process. It's not an overnight.
So therefore, if that is the case, then where does compassion come into this story? And I'm not for 1 second condoning any of the actions that took place over the years and possibly are still taking place, not for 1 second. However, if what you've just said is true, therefore one would reasonably think that one should have a level of compassion to those who are indoctrinated into a system that they probably had no choice but get indoctrinated into. So how do we take that notion and try and start healing from within then?
Yeah, so
or help the system heal from within. That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, and it's a great question, Nicky. And we have to also honour that every person has to go through their process. So let's say you and I can talk calmly about this now. We might have someone screaming at the screen at this point, saying there's no way, no love, no compassion for these people. Yeah, what we can allow ourselves to do when we do awaken inside of ourselves to a level of love and compassion and a realization that there are no toxic men or people, there's simply unconscious people, then we owe it to ourselves, first of all, to continue to awaken ourselves. And this is something I spend a lot of time talking about. The fact that for there to be peace in the world, there needs to be peace in the cities. There's a beautiful piece that talks about this. And for there to be peace in the cities, there needs to be peace in the towns. And for there to be peace in the towns, there needs to be peace in the houses. And for there to be peace in the houses, there needs to be peace within individuals. And for there to be peace within individuals, they need to have peaceful minds. So we can find the journey, if you like, to peace within comes about with ourselves, first of all. And for peace to be in the world, it also starts with ourselves. And so I'm always saying to people, look, the only work that you need to do is the work on yourself. The only contribution that you need to make is the contribution that you can make. Because now we are, as the Gandhi sort of saying goes, be the change you want to see in others in the world. And therefore we're taking on that opportunity that is given to each and every one of us to simply be the best version of us that we can be. What does that require? A journey into love and compassion.
Yeah, and calling a spade, there's probably people listening or watching this right now going, who the F is this guy speaking
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Nicky today, right? And what are these so-called teachings that he's bringing here today? And it's all woo-woo and witchcraftery and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And to be fair to you, you didn't get here today. You got here after a very long process. And I think by relating the story on how you got to this point, it will bring people to the understanding of where you're coming from. And then they can decide whether it's of value to them or not. So
Mm.
going back then, post education, so you decided you weren't going to be a priest.
Mm.
So you went into the corporate world or into the business world. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I went into the business world and into insurance. I liked this idea of making money. I was taken with it. I'm like, okay, make money. How can we make money? And so I was invited to go into the insurance world, which was basically direct sales, which at that tender age of like 18, absolutely nothing about. And then in the first year, I managed to talk my bank manager into giving me a significant overdraft. So I made very few sales, I made very little money, and my biggest success was my overdraft. And then at the end of the first year, there's a reckoning because it's like, okay, well, this can't go on. And the bank manager's not going to. And this is when bank managers were very personable with people, and you could sit down, you could have a chat. And so then using the insurance and things, I got into mortgages and found a successful way of doing off-page or on-page marketing and going out then around the UK, helping people to refinance. And I would start on a Monday. I'd do 1,000 miles a week in my car, and I would drive down to the Midlands, out to South Wales, through London, back up the other coast, and I would arrive back in Liverpool in time to play rugby on a Saturday. That was my
Now,
routine.
when you convinced the bank manager, and as you rightly said, this is when bank managers actually had control over lending and control over their
Yeah.
own branch, which is not the case today. Um, that's quite the feat to convince your bank manager to lend you some money. Did you at that point recognize, holy shit, I am a confident communicator here. I am able to influence. I am able to sell my story in such a way that I can get people to where I need them to be in order for me to progress. Was that even a realization at the
No,
time or not? Right.
no, far from it. I was doing training courses. People back then, there were interpersonal skills and personal development was already a thing. It was starting to ripple out from the States. I think in insurance there was a thing called $1 Million Round Table. So every year there would be the teachings from $1 Million Round Table, many of which you still see today, repackaged in similar but slightly different ways. So no, it was probably more begging at the time than anything, that looked
Okay.
remotely sophisticated. And for some reason, the bank manager continued to support me until he didn't. And then some people might call it a low, some people might call it rock bottom, but then you've got to do something about it. And we all know the idea that a piece of coal under pressure forms a diamond. And sometimes as human beings, we need pressure because we're behaving like a piece of coal. We just throw us on the fire and we just burn out. So we need to be hardened, toughened in order to be able to look fantastic, look amazing and sparkle like a diamond. And it's not always the type of pressure that we like or feel that we would want. Yeah, it's a rite of passage, something that we need to go through. So the pressure from the bank manager, as well as just my overall circumstances, really forced me, I'm going to use it that way, to be creative, because it wasn't a conscious control that I had. It was more, oh shit, I need to do something and I need to do it quick. And that's when I came across this idea with mortgages and realizing, the people all over the country, because the idea in the UK is very different to other parts of the world, and the same in Ireland, where people are just totally mind bent on buying property. It's not the same. In a lot of our European neighbours, they all rent.
Yeah.
In Germany, for example. I managed to somehow latch onto that, and then I would go and do the mortgages and sell them a life policy, and make some sales, and became very good at that. I found
Now
myself proud.
I need to interject here, and sorry to cut across you there, Greg. So, in these moments of your developmental business years, you were getting a lot of training, a lot of grounding, a lot of expertise coming in from the States, a lot of mindset work, how to turn negatives into a positive, all of that stuff. Were you fully congruent with where you were on, with the path that you were on at that point? Or was there anything saying to you, this is great and I'm making money, but, do I really want this? Or am I just doing this to make money? Am I just doing this to earn a living? What was your congruency like at that moment in time, if you can recall?
Yeah, I'd say very low. Because it's the conflicted aspect. We mentioned before imposter. The imposter syndrome. There's all of these low self-esteem. There's also conflicted aspects. You're brought up in a Catholicized environment where it's meant to be about charity and giving, and here we are now in the business world, driven and taking and motivated, and actually internally it's hugely conflicted, because what you've actually got is you've got different forces now that you experience as a human pulling you apart, but you don't recognize it at that. You'll all of a sudden you'll be so tired and you won't know why, but it's to do with the inner conflicts. All of a sudden you'll be ill and you won't know why, but it's to do with the inner conflicts. You'll arrive at your day of your holiday, and it'd be interesting to do a poll. How many people were then instantly ill at the point of holiday because the body was like, no more, and I need to recuperate and regather because of this absolute lunatic journey that you've been pursuing. So no, it's far from congruent. And if anything, it was more an extension of those horrible school days where I was churned up inside, totally misaligned, and now heading on a journey into greed, which will form another chapter.
And you were good at it.
Yeah, I wasn't great at that point. I was okay at that point because I'm still sort of between 18 and 21. So I'm young in the environment that I'm in, and I'm trying to work it out. And actually being from Liverpool or Ireland, what you'll find is that we have a propensity towards angles, towards what's the angle here? Now there's a huge problem, what's the detour here? What's the workaround? What's the shortcut here? And later on, you have to work all of those things out, because actually the shortcut and the angle and the workaround is the straight path. Because the minute you deviate from that path, you're going into corrupting your inner landscape. You're misaligning who you really are with some sort of scheme that you've created, some sort of shortcut that you think is a good idea, but actually it's not at the level of the consciousness. And that's why it comes back at a later date and has a sting in the tail, or it bites you on the backside.
Yeah, but Greg, I've got to earn a living here. I've got to buy my house. I've got to have a nice car. I've got to have, all the trappings of a young entrepreneurial yuppie, as they were called at that point. And was there any element of that, of the trappings, that really sang to you, or was
Yeah.
again were all the trappings just in conflict with who you are, who you
Yeah,
were?
so yeah, I think what you're capturing, Nick, is so true. You're caught up in the yuppie 80s and this, Thatcherite drive for get as much as you can and sort of the freedom of the market and the economy. So if we see that going on the outside, but actually the effect of that on the inside is equally as dramatic, yet massively painful, because there's a deeper knowing inside of us that where I'm heading right now is not the right direction for me to be in alignment. And that is why, people do burn out, because they can sustain these storylines for a short period of time. But again, there is a sting in the tail, and you can't
What
avoid it.
what is that drive, or what is that thing that allows us to feel that we're not on the right path? Is that an innate sense, or is that learned from our upbringing? What is it?
Okay, so it's good to understand what drives us onto we'll call it the wrong path, just
Yeah,
to make it easier to understand. And what
yeah,
drives,
and yeah. So, kind of to really always on to really oversimplify my question, we know what drive. Well, you're going to explain what drives us onto the wrong path, but how do we know there's a right path?
yeah,
Where does that come from?
yeah. So the wrong path is born out of the external environment. So this is where we have to really break down what's going on outside of us and what's going on inside of us. And when we externalize, we're always externalizing through the senses. So because our senses go out into the world, what we see, what we hear, what we feel, it's all drawing us outwardly. And then the bit inside that latches onto that, which is described very beautifully in the Yoga Sutras, is desires. And desires are stories that we've made up and told ourselves as to how the external environment will satisfy us. It's sort of like we're telling ourselves a story of how these things called senses, if we can just get our hands on, and then, fast car, big house, loads of money, beautiful women, if we can just get our hands on those things, everything's going to be amazing. But actually, the Yoga Sutras tell us that this is just a hungry ghost philosophy. And that is why it's always empty, because it's actually, we're pursuing a part of us that can never be satisfied. And the part of us that can never be satisfied in the external world. And the burnout eventually, and most people need to burn out over and over and over again, hence we see people caught in addictive loops or the challenges or problems, is also, so it's driven by desires, which is driven then by the egoic aspect of us. And this is where then, the ego can unfortunately get a bad name for itself. Because eventually we learn to integrate the ego, we learn to drop the desires, integrate the ego, and turn the senses back in on ourselves. And the reason that then the journey becomes inward, which comes from the beautiful saying, unless you go within, you go without, that we have to go within. And we know that this is the case. But it's like arriving at the thickest, densest forest and going, how the hell, well, you're just being in hell, but how the hell do I go on a journey into this in order to find what it is that I'm looking for? And
Yeah, Yeah, so which begs the question: how do we know there's a right path, or what is? And this is an argument or a discussion that I've had for a very long time with some friends of mine. Is truth or the right path, for want of a more simplistic phrase, is that innate in us, innate, or do we learn it?
Yeah, it's innate. Yeah,
It's innate, right?
it's innate. Yeah, I mean, the learning, because it's more a remembering than a learning. Because the part of us that we turn inwardly towards to seek, as all the scriptures say across different systems, that part is as it is, was, and always will be. It's unchangeable. It's incorruptible. And therefore, we're going back to essence, the essence of all of who we are. Which, by the way, the misery that we caused ourselves in the external world by fueling the senses and feeding them all drops away into insignificance, because the inward journey leads to higher highs than you can ever possibly imagine, which is why we hear words like bliss, enlightenment, and they're places then that we have to work towards, to work for. And actually, you may be surprised, but those people who were driven by the external world can have a huge advantage if they choose to use it, because once they turn inward, they need to simply find the same level of drive that they had before and now drive onto this inward path with the same passion and purpose that they used to drive onto the external path. In the early stages, that becomes a tug of war. And also, when we go within to start with, we use nefarious and strange ways to try and navigate. Why? Because they're the things that work for us on the outside. We try, when we go within, to take shortcuts, to do workarounds. But the shortcuts and the workarounds actually, or to create hacks, they don't work on the inside. What works is the straight path, the narrow path.
Yeah. And clearly you can't get there without experiencing the decadence of the external world first. And you were absolutely caught up in the decadence.
Yeah, buried.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I made and lost millions, literally millions on 4 occasions. And so, having been doing my mortgages and my insurance policies, I began to sit and think, well, who's making all the money? Because I'm just getting little bits. I'm getting crumbs from the loaf here. Who's making all the money? And I realized then at that point, the people who were making all the money were the people who had the teams of people working for them. So if I've got a team, I can have a little bit of what everyone's doing, and I can do my own, and that way I can make so much more money. So I then grow a team, I go and join an organization, and they've got a business plan, they're floated on the market, and I am fired up and I am driven, and I am number one in the country as an individual for selling financial products. And my team is the number one team in the UK, average per capita. And my shares and share options are just flooding in towards me. And I've got this 3-year share option plan. And just to shortcut it, because there's so many stories in that, I get to within a month of it paying out. And one of the directors makes an announcement to basically say the company is full of shit. Now, at this point, I 1 month later can vest and just sell on the open market. And if you imagine, I've been doing this calculation daily now for years. What my numbers at, where I'm at, how's it going? And you could say at that point, well, come on, Greg, you didn't have it. Okay, I could smell it. I was that close. And then the rug, we talk about rug pulls today. This is a this is an early iteration of a rug pull, because this guy chooses to make this comment and then he can't backpedal quick enough. The market reacts, the shares become junk, and it literally, the graph just does the straight down.
Wow.
And I'm like, what's this?
Yeah. Yeah. Holy smokes. I need to understand one last piece about how you got to that point.
Yeah.
You obviously had or have a superpower of some sort to enable you to have the foresight to go for this, and then to build a team around you, and then to consistently make the sales to make you number one. What was, or what were your superpowers to enable you to get to that point?
Well, we can go super fat powers. We could also go stupidity, because I had, one of these horrendous work-life imbalances. And you could say that I'm driven. Well, I am, but just the description I just gave you, I'm driven by desires. I want to be wealthy. I want to have a load of money. But actually, when you've done it a few times, you begin to realize, hang on a minute, how much is enough? And then you start to understand those sayings, too much is not enough. And that is the hungry ghost. So people get lost in this mentality, and it gathers momentum, and then it is the hamster wheel. It just traps you. So in terms of superpowers, yeah. So by this point, one of the things that I've done, and you mentioned it before, is I found Tony Robbins. So first time he ever came to the UK, I think it was the first in South Wales, down in Cardiff. There was an event. Went to the event, and then after the event, this is the type of mind I've got. I'm sat there thinking, well, who taught him?
Yeah.
So I don't get lost in Tony Robbins. I go and find John Grinder and Richard Bandler.
The Richard Bandlers of the world, yeah.
Yeah, so I go and find them. Bandler, I mean, if I think I'm a long way from home, the guy, just some of the stories, backstories, different, another time. John Grinder,
yeah,
really get aligned with. So I go and study under John Grinder. He points me in the direction of other people that I should train with. And then I'm into communication. So the superpower that I developed during this period is to become an exceptional communicator, more specifically in a sales environment or on stage making a presentation. And I was learning and continue to learn what Tony Robbins was taught by them. And a lot of people don't realize that Robbins, via a court, was ordered to pay them a proportion of his earnings. I don't know what the detailing of it is, because he went on, and instead of calling it NLP, Robbins said, I had a dream and I woke up and I had this thing called NAC.
Yeah.
It just wasn't.
Yeah.
So, but people don't necessarily know these. That there's the idea of a shortcut, which isn't. It just becomes a long way around.
Yeah, so. I think the most fascinating aspect of NLP, which I've studied as well, is the notion that Bandler and Grinder were able to pull together a body of work from the top 1%ers in the world, from the top doctors, physicians, psychologists, hypnotists, sports people, politicians, whatever it was. They were able to pull together all of the traits, behaviors, the things that made them 1%ers, and then pull it into that body of work, which is called NLP. That to me is just absolutely fascinating, and that's how a lot of people like Tony Robbins that's what they've dined out on for the last 30 years or so on. And it continues to be a transformative piece of work. It continues to be like a seriously incredible agent for change in the world today, and that's what you used to help you become more successful in business, if I'm hearing.
I'd say it was an attempt to become more successful, because the other thing that goes with it, Nicky, as you know, is intention. And therefore, you can give someone, we give someone nuclear power. And if the intention's wrong, they make bombs. If the intention's right, they power every home in the nation. And they reduce the cost of fuel to zero. So we've got, intentionality is a huge part. And even, at a young age, because I started studying this really young. So just to give you the idea of the way my mind worked, it was like, so it's John Grinder, Richard Bandler, find Grinder, find the people that he thinks are the best, which I then speak to the guy, and he says to me, okay, it'll cost you 10 grand. This is like way back. It'll cost you 10 grand, and I'll come up to Liverpool and I'll teach you. And I said, okay, well, if I can get 10 people in a room who pay 1,000 each, will you do it? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So I go out, I get 10 people, we pay 1,000 each. And that training is still talked about today by all the people who attended, because at the time it was at the forefront. It was so developmental, transformational. It literally blew the minds of people. The dilemma then, if there is one, is then you find the boundaries of that and you've got to go again. But the point that I was making is intentionality. If your intention's wrong, then you're rotting on the inside, because you're not using it directly and necessarily for the right things. And this is where
I like the analogy. Yeah, I like the analogy that of the hammer. You can use a hammer to build the house or to break down the house, and there is no doubt that the tools and methodologies that are learned through NLP or neuro-linguistic programming can absolutely do either. So you have got to decide as an individual, are you going to use it for transformative, positive purposes, or are you going to use it in nefarious, negative ways? And we've seen people who've done that as well, and that's quite a dangerous space to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially when they don't realise it as well, by the way, because this is the bit where people go, they're toxic, and I'd say, look, they're not. They're unconscious, because they actually think, in a lot of instances, they think they're doing what good. Then they get to the point where they know they're not, but they have to keep moving because they think they need to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. And it just goes from bad to worse. It's part of the awakening process. People might not like it. Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah. You mentioned that you've given us the first example of making a lot of money on paper and then losing it again. And you've mentioned that you've done that 4 times in your life.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time that the actual million was in your bank account, or was it all on paper? Give us a brief highlight of those other occasions.
Yeah. So I've never, it's a great question. I've never had the 1 million in my account as a number. And it's important to contextualize it, because like if you're on the hamster wheel, you are not sat still. Deals are coming in left, right, and center, and you are farming. You are, you're into your next deal and your next deal and your next deal. And so after the building of teams one, I then sat and I was like back at my thing again, like, okay, this teams thing and these share options, all my controls outside of me. Okay, so how do I get the control inside and make the millions? By having the loaf. So I've then got my brother-in-law, who was a hugely intelligent individual, photographic memory, first-class maths degree, international chess master, Institute of Stock. The list goes on. He's just brighter than bright can be. And super underestimated by people, because you meet him and he's got a Liverpool accent, and people just then just don't see what is there, this genius code. So I would constantly go back to my brother-in-law, who I helped get his first job in money and finance, which he was eternally grateful for. He's like, he earned more money than he'd ever dreamed of earning, because he'd been brought up in a really poor part of Liverpool. and his mind was blown by the whole thing. But then we start getting really creative, and we devise a scheme which is based on basically printing money, but legally. And people say, well, how do you do that? And it involved a shell company, a loan, and a pension arrangement. And I won't get into the details. Worked an absolute dream. We took millions, literally millions out of the system. We worked with accountants, doctors, dentists, solicitors. People were queuing up because what we were doing, we were like Robin Hood. We were taking off the tax man and we were distributing it. And we'd keep half and the customers would keep half. Everyone loved us.
So tell me, help me understand the actual mechanics. So you would, if I'm hearing you correctly, you would arrange a tax break for these businesses. Is that right?
Correct. So back at this point in time, the way a pension worked is you could put 100% of your annual salary into your pension. So if you imagine, you go to the average solicitor, doctor, dentist, that they're all earning 150 grand. And you go, okay, are you making a pension contribution this year? They'd be like, are you joking? Once I've paid the school fees, we've been on holiday, I've paid for Christmas, there's no money left. And we go, well, if we lend you the money to make the pension contribution, will you make it? And they're like, well, for what reason? And we go, well, if we do that, you make 30 grand and we make 30 grand. And they'd be like, yeah, let's do it. And then we'd show them all the detailing, all the paperwork. And, so this is the hive mind of my brother-in-law in terms of, so we can do this. So we start, everyone loves it. And we're not, I would say to you by this point, we're not the most driven. So we get up, we do a few of these deals and, money's just pouring in. Like you've never seen it. Anyway, people, and this happens in business and in life, stupid people start to copy us. But the problem is the copy is not as good as the original.
Okay.
So they start then doing what? Taking shortcuts. So they don't set up the arrangement as it should be set up. And then I'll fast forward it a little bit, but we can always come back and do another show on this alone. So we take millions out of the system and we distribute to our clients who will love us, and we keep our share ourselves. We've got it all administered, everything set up. And then on this one day, I get taken from my bed at gunpoint in the early hours of the morning, but raided by the revenue, and it's just like something off.
What?
Yeah, something off police, something or other. It's totally surreal. My kids' bags are searched on the way to before they go out to school. So I awaken. They've come in through the door, up the stairs. There's 13 arrests simultaneously across the UK. Now, I have to tell you this bit in order to get you right into the heart of the story, so you can imagine what I'm like when I arrive at the police station. Yeah. So the first thing they say, where's your guns? Where's your drugs? Where's your cash? And I'm like, sorry to disappoint you, but I've got no drugs, I've got no guns, and I've got no cash. Anyway, they strip the house. They even take the shampoo bottles. They strip it, they bag it, kids' computers, phones, biscuit tins, bread bins. They strip the place. Now, at this point, they say, is there anything you want to do? And I get up and I go, yeah, I want to get a shower. And they go, no, there's no shower in here. You're not getting a shower. See, what you realise is, which I tuned into straight away, I'm like, they're petrified here. because they should know me because I've been a UK citizen at this point for nearly 40 years. I've got no record at all. I went to a private school, got battered by Christian brothers. They should know who I am. I've been in the corporate world. And you'd think they've done their background and their research. But the fact is, they've had the arrest warrant signed off by a friend at Manchester Crown Court who signs these arrest warrants off when he shouldn't be. So, anyway, I'm now marched down the stairs.
Just quickly, did you have any inkling that this was happening at all? Or was it a complete surprise that they turned up on your doorstep?
The only inkling I had was the night before. I had this thing, I'm being followed. And they'd obviously followed me the night before to track my movement so they could pick me up in the morning. And I knew that I was being followed. I had this sick feeling in my stomach. There was like a sixth sense that there's something happening here, there's something going down. But what you got to remember, Nicky, is look, here's the weird thing. Look, we've done nothing wrong. And this is what blows the minds of people then when you tell this story. But not only when you tell the story, all the family around you who aren't involved, because it's the Inland Revenue and the government and this, they've got this blinkered alignment with them. And they immediately, no one can look, everyone would walk around like this. And we'd be like, look, we haven't done anything wrong. And they'd be like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's why it looked like something like a Hollywood blockbuster on my drive that morning. And what was slightly more interesting is I lived next door to the private school that my 3 kids went to.
Right. So you were guilty until proven innocent, right?
Yeah, exactly. Squad cars everywhere and so. So anyway, they take me down to the police station and talk about thick. I mean, they didn't know one end of the pension from another. And one of them is reported later on as saying, and this is read out in court and everyone wets themselves laughing. There was a few of these one-liners. The guy goes, at one point, I didn't know if I was interviewing Mr. Garrett or Mr. Garrett was interviewing me.
Great.
Because they were that stupid. They don't know. And they offer me this duty solicitor. And the duty solicitor comes in. This is read out in court as well. And she goes, I want to act for you. And I'm like, okay, let me just ask you a few questions. How much do you know about pensions? She goes, nothing. I said, okay. I said, so this is a pensions matter. So how much do you know about the law? She goes, yeah, a bit. I said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll go in. You stick to the law, I'll stick to the pensions. And let's get ourselves out of here as quickly as we can. So we go in. And anyway, I end up being in the system for maybe 10 years then, where they drag us through absolute. And the guy who's head of the revenue at the time, and you can go back and find this in the press, he says, I don't care whether these guys are innocent or not. We'll find that out later. So what happened was we just pissed them off. We'd pissed them off because they knew we'd done them. They knew it. So then what they do is, so when they take me in, they show me this list of names. And I look down the list. And the first 6 people I know, because I can see my brother-in-law's name and I can see other people on the list that I know who are introducers to the scheme or advisors to the scheme or whatever. And then the second half, I'm like, I don't know any of these people. And these people then are the ones. So 2 things. A, they'd robbed our scheme and tried to replicate it and market it. They went and they did it badly. And then one of them went to a big hitter in Manchester, PwC, and asked for advice. The guy from PwC just phoned the revenue. And we know that that's the loop. So you talk about stupidity. And then what happens? He gets his big payday, his multi-million-pound payday. The minute the domino goes down, and then everyone just wants to keep you in the system. You can tell anyone you're as innocent as you want. No one cares. They want you in the system, doing the miles, doing the exercise, all the way through, into court. Now, well, in court, we had over 20 barristers sat in lines in the courtroom, all on the clock, all getting paid. You know, if you want to see fraud at the highest level, go and observe a British courtroom. It is an absolute scandal. That's where the money, another area where the money's ripped out the system. Anyway, let's not get bitter about that right now. And I'm not. I just observe it, see it for what it is. So, meanwhile, though, other people had also, you begin to realise now what the bigger picture looks like. And other people had also stolen our scheme. Replicated it badly. And people did end up serving time because they didn't know what they were doing. And it's like, you know, getting a joke and then you go and try and tell it and no one laughs and it's not funny because you didn't listen closely when the joke was being told the first time. You didn't get the punchline. And that's what these people were like. So a lot of people did a lot of time. We get to court, and just to show you how bad these, again, the revenue and these people are. And I offer no apology to these people, stupid beyond measure, that they then on day one, you can imagine this. So we're in the court and the prosecution puts his hands up like this. And then, you know, and he's always head down, like, you know, bow to the bench sort of thing. And they're like, Your Honour. And he's like, yes, Mr. Prosecution. And he gets up, oh, Your Honour, it's fallen upon me to just make this request, this simple request, that we'd like to substitute our expert witness. And we're just all in the talk, like, what? This has been going now on this expert witness's testimony where we think he's lied. And we're waiting to get him in the dock to rip him to bits. No, we'd like to, it's nothing. We've got another young gentleman who's the new expert, equally as qualified, brilliant young mind, that we'd like to substitute. Anyway, barristers start popping up because we're all like, absolutely no way. So day one, there's then a recess for like 48 hours. Because if you've got a point of law or something significant, jury gets kicked out. And then it needs to be debated. So anyway, goes through this period and then we break for the weekend. Judge comes back Monday morning and the judge goes, okay, I've listened to everyone's arguments. No, you cannot substitute your expert. So now imagine this. Your Honour, it saddens me to be the one who has to tell you that he retired on the grounds of ill health 3 years ago. What? And what had happened is they'd strong-armed him. In order to get busted to start with, he had to lie in the document.
Right.
And in his technical assessment, he lied. And then as they put pressure on him to say, come and lie in court, and I'm using very simple language, I'm sure they will have been all flowery. Well, just say this and that. The guy buckled, lost his health, and retired from service. And this is the biggest tax case that year. It's the biggest case in the UK. So we're talking significant. And so they cheat and they lie and they steal because in disclosure, that should have been disclosed to us 3 years earlier. And they didn't disclose.
So the case was thrown out, was it?
Well, it does eventually get thrown out, but you wouldn't believe how long. So we just went in, Nicky, every day, and just another little funny story. So every day on the way in to the area that we'd all sit at the back behind the screen, I have to go past the prosecution, and there's the main guy, and then is his subordinate, and I go over and I say, now listen, boys. Today you've got up this expert, this guy. It's going to be a horrible day for you today. It's going to be horrible. because what you fail to see, which you will see by the end of today, is just beyond mesmerizing. And when you see it, it'll be like the sun rising in the morning. It'll hit you straight between the eyes, and you'll be in full glare of everyone, and you'll realize what you've gotten wrong. And they'd be like looking at me like I'm some. Anyway, 2 weeks into the trial, on one morning, the judge says, "Okay, point of order. Can we ask Mr. Garrett to stop speaking to the prosecution of a morning?" Which is just a moral victory. And in the thing at the back, everyone's like rolling around laughing.
Brilliant.
So
Brilliant.
we only get, what happens is we get to half time. So the prosecution has to go first and make its case. At half time, the judge says, "Right, I've heard enough. I do not know what you're telling me these guys have done. Because every time you come with a line, they give all the answers, and then you try to regroup and tell me they've done something else. And now you've done it 5 times. So this is the judge. I do not know which one of these 5 things you're trying to tell me that you're trying to prosecute them for." So the judge says, so we need to now, so the case is closed. So now they can immediately appeal, like immediately. And we get taken down to the High Court in London immediately. So literally, if it was Monday, I can't remember the dates, but if it was Monday, on Wednesday, we're in the High Court in front of Lord Chief Justice. And Lord Chief Justice, we were told, look, this will be back in next Monday. Don't think you're getting off here, because they're all in it together. To be fair to Lord Chief Justice, he just said, "Okay, I think the way you've handled this to the prosecution is appalling, and these men need to be set free." And their final throw of the dice, then, when we get back, we're in Birmingham Crown Court. We get back to Birmingham Crown Court, and the judge says, "Right, because you have to be freed then, even though you've done nothing, they still have to let you go. It's part of their coercive control policy. So you go," and he says, "So I'm setting you all free, but what I need to warn you of, I am not a tax judge. So I cannot tell you that your scheme worked." It's interesting. So, you know, what they're basically saying is, lads, don't take the piss, please. Do not roll the dice again, because you might find yourself in some way back in here. And one other funny thing, there's a point in the case where the judge says, "Okay, so the guy who's being cross-examined, he goes, well, if they hadn't been able to do this, they never could have done this scheme." And I'm sat next to my brother-in-law, and he goes, "Well, I could have done it this way. I could have done it that way. I could have done it that way. I could have done it this way." Anyway, he had like 20 other ways he could have done it if they'd have shut this one particular loophole down. So their final throw of the dice, though, was they managed to get us banned as direct. So we win that. We win the criminal case. And then they take us to a civil court, which I just thought was below the belt. I thought, come on, boys, you've lost fair and square. You've been battered here. Took us to a civil court, which is a kangaroo court. I've never seen it. It's a horrible situation. Prosecution and the judge don't listen to a word, not interested, go through the motions, and we got banned as directors for 13 years each.
Okay.
Just to say to us.
Okay.
So there you go.
So as that fascinating story, and as that story unfolded over that 10 or whatever, 12 years, whatever it was, what effect did that have on your mental strength, your resilience, your mental health, and did you find yourself being further driven into the arms of the world of self-discovery?
So if you imagine, of the people who are being prosecuted, some people turn to the use of drugs, either prescribed or otherwise. I personally, I've never touched any substance and refused I just saw it as an opportunity to strengthen my mind. I became very ill at times. So people talk about dark nights of the soul. It is dark. And not because you're staring down the barrel at, okay, what's the worst case here? Okay, you could get 10 years for this. And if you don't win, and it's, so you're setting out to win, but if you don't win, you'll get 10 years. Well, what happens to the families then? How do they survive if you get 10 years? So we had to do all sorts, like from being 100% straight, we had to do all sorts of maneuvers to put monies in places for families, and because you've got to prepare now. You've got to store the acorns just in case.
Yeah.
But the mental health side was very challenging, torturous. And also, if you can imagine, Nicky, so I'd head off to Birmingham for Monday to Friday. When I came back on a Friday up to the Lake District to my wife and family, she'd then be like, well, what am I going to do? What? So you'd just been tortured all week. And now the family that haven't got that outlet or that camaraderie or that teamwork, and that became unbearable. We ended up getting divorced in the end. It's just beyond impossible to navigate, and there's just no attention given to this. So when that guy from the revenue saying, I don't care whether they've done anything wrong or not, the consequences across people's lives are devastating. And then, and also we spend all the money. So, because we talk about the making and the losing of millions, all the money that we made is reinvested back into years of fighting in order to win the case, and also to prepare in case we get sent down. So, and that money soon disappears, and then you can't make a claim against the public purse. So even though we win, there's no judge in the land who apparently will find against the public purse. So you can't go and say, okay, you just ruined my life. Not
interested. Out of pocket. Was that sounds like a real low point for you at that point? Was it after the divorce? Was that the low point, or did it get even lower than that?
No, it's fairly low where, you're telling your kids, me and your mother are going our own ways. But my mind was completely mangled at this point, because you've seen into the belly of the beast. You've seen the way the system behaves, and, in response to how we behave. So it's important that we take responsibility, because we could have just gone 20 miles an hour slower, being within the speed limit, and done a scheme that was less aggressive, and probably never have gotten any heat. But because we just decided, because we just turned the temperature up, turned the speed up. And
yeah,
it's, you bring this attention to yourself. But in terms of your mental...
Go ahead, yeah.
I was going to say, in terms of your mental state, it's torture and it's horrible. Yeah, if you're brave enough and courageous enough, you've got to sit and work out the torture that you've brought to yourself, and that's what I chose to do.
Without being too cliched about it, what was the turning point? What was the first little glimmer of light? What was the first step that you took back to the road of redemption and the road of self-recovery?
Yeah, the road back is really, I'd make a determination because inside of the court case, we've made and lost millions on huge property deals as well, just to give you the very quickly the other aspect. And I make a determination where I'm like, okay, there's something I need to pay attention to here. there's something I'm not listening to, there's something I'm blind to or deaf to or numb to. And I make the decision at that point. I've got people phoning me, Greg, we've got this deal, that deal. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And then I decide I need to go off on my yogic journey. I need to go and free my mind from this enslavement that has now lasted for tens of years.
Okay, so you talked about yogic experiences, not for the first time in this discussion. I don't actually know what a yogi is. Could you, for the uninitiated of us, please explain, very layman's terms, what is a yogi? Where did it come from? Why is it important?
Yeah, so yoga means union. So to be yogic is to be united mind, body and spirit. And therefore, if we look at the corporate, we're into a bodily, out there experience where we're using the mind in certain ways in order to make corporate gains or personal gains. And we could say in that way that we're missing the spirit element, yet we're also using the mind in a single faceted way. Whereas when we bring in the yogic element, we now bring the spirit element to life. And in bringing the spirit element to life, we now come mind, body and spirit. And in balancing that, we're making different decisions. For example, would the yogi do the scheme that we did against the revenue? No, the yogi would go 20 miles an hour slower and do it inside a balance.
Is there an original yogi? And is there a correlation between yogi and yoga?
Yeah, so, we could go and say the original yogi is Brahman, or, we've got then Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, who are these, who are the three in one, which translate energetically into being, doing, and having, which are the elements of action for us as individuals. And if we're looking for the original yogi, we could also, in an Eastern sense, Christ would be seen as a great yogi. So Yogananda.
So yogi is a generic generic term for a person who's able to bring body, mind, and soul together.
Yeah, balanced. Yeah, body,
balanced.
mind, and
Okay.
soul. Another way to express it is feet on the ground, head in the clouds. So you're able to be grounded whilst having the highest thoughts.
Right. What's the association with yoga then? Is that the body piece?
Yeah, so yoga... so yoga itself translates as union. So whereas the body piece is the asanas, they're the postures that you do. But most people use the term yoga to describe that, which it's not. The actual term yoga covers a much broader spectrum of things, which includes the breath work, the body postures, and meditation, as well as other elements as well. So, and what we're doing then inside of a yogic system is we're using the elements that the original yogis discovered in order to realign from the inside out.
Is yogiism, and please forgive the crude name there, but is it a religion? Is it a movement? Is it the equivalent of somebody following Jesus? What is it?
Yeah, so it's an open system, and what we mean by that is if you take a religion, then the religion tends to have walls and boundaries inside of it, outside of it. It has dogmas, whereas the yogic system, if you look at one of the teachings is called Ishvara, Ishvara Pranidhana, and it means pursuit of the highest. Now, pursuit of the highest is beyond an individuated God. It's just keep pursuing whatever is the highest. So if you were in the work in a business setting, and I'd be like, Nikki, where are you at now? Okay, what's beyond this? Okay, let's pursue that. And then you get there and about like, what's beyond this? Let's pursue that. So they have this open system, which is pursuit of the highest. And then depending on which branch of it you're looking at, the idea is to include everything. So we include the material world, which actually gives us direct feedback moment to moment, day to day, like this interaction now. And we use our inner world as well. So we're open to all and everything. We're never excluding, we're always including. What would an example of that be? Well, the greatest atrocities, the biggest difficulties and dilemmas, we need to learn to look at them, because it is only ever our next starting point. We don't...
Yeah, in order to understand it a little more, or to maybe put a practical viewpoint on it, is there a yogi capital somewhere in the world? Is there a corporate headquarters for yogiism? Is there...
Yeah, so
does anything exist? Is there an infrastructure?
India, I would say, is the homeland of the yogis. And a great book, if people were more interested, because I believe that the source materials are key. A beautiful soul called Yogananda, who wrote the book Autobiography of a Yogi, which was the book that Steve Jobs gave out at his funeral to every person who attended, because he realized that this was the book of significant importance. And this is a humble...
Would Mahatma Gandhi have been known as a yogi?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And Yogananda was one of Gandhi's guides, and Gandhi and Yogananda did spend a lot of time together, and some of Gandhi's ashes are actually at one of the retreat centers of Yogananda in the States, actually. So.
Okay. And to understand how you got there clearly, was that the next part of your investigation from the Grinder and Bandler piece? So did you get to Yogi Town through those guys? Is that how you got there?
No, I'd found the borders and the boundaries of NLP, and then I'm saying, okay, what's beyond this? And if you like, very much in alignment with what I just said, right? What's the next highest thing? Because that's only the highest thing whilst it is, until there's something higher. And then in pursuing the next highest thing, I go off and go to the Himalayas, go to these different places around the world. I spend time with Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment. Very well-known individual in personal development. Spent some time studying with him. And then I find who I would call my teacher. And then I find someone who can give me the guidance and the instruction that I need in a very nurturing, soft, gentle way, which wasn't lost on me, because he wasn't like that with everyone. And people would be like, Greg, why is he like that with you? But I understand that he was, because of the upbringing that I had under the Christian Brothers. And he knew that I didn't need that approach.
Yeah. He knew the journey you'd been on, and he knew the stage of evolution that you were at. So he was able to tap into that and take you to a higher height quicker than others.
Yeah, and just to, give the audience here perspective, he could read my mind, any thought. He could read the minds of all the people in the room, even if there was 200 of them there. And, these capabilities do exist, and I've lived in environments with them. And these are the gifts that are latent potentials inside of all of us. And what he could also do, which is why he could see my upbringing, is that he could see your past lives as well as his own. And I'm sharing this with you because a lot of people use words like supernatural, but you come to realize, well, what if that was natural? And the idea for me was then you're in front of someone where quite literally you are naked, mind, body and spirit. Everything is revealed. And there's something really freeing about that, where there's no requirement for any ego, because it has no place, because it's seen through and beyond. And that is where then I begin to strip away all of the schemes and scams and detours and misdirections and bypasses that I've undertaken throughout my life.
Wow. That must have been such a liberating experience.
Yeah, it took years though, Nick. It wasn't, I'd love to say to people it was instant. It wasn't. And the reason it's not is because when you meet a real teacher, they're not going to steal your lesson from you. They'll guide you so that you'll take a shorter route, a more efficient path. And he would say to me things like, Greg, no, not that. No, not that. And there's a famous saying in India, which is neti, which is not this, not that. And he'd forever be looking at me going, no, Greg, no, not that. And this is then you're unraveling, you're unpeeling, because you're so used to, like you talked about conditioned behavior before. You're so used to behaving in a certain way. And you've got to now unravel all of that. The way that you thought was the way of operating in the world is a way of operating in the world. Yeah, it's corrupt.
Yeah. The crazy thing about this story is the next part. And I appreciate we're going to skip over a bit of stuff here, right? But the crazy thing is that during that denudation process, if I can call it that, of stripping everything away, including probably turning your back on the business world and the corporate world, or aspects of that you didn't want to be involved in anymore. The crazy part is that you've now been able to see that there is a way to still build the money or the wealth that one needs to survive, and marry that with the inner peace that you have achieved through the yogi education. Mm-hmm. And you've become a corporate yogi in your own right.
Yeah.
So what is that? And tell us how you actually marry all three parts together peacefully.
Yeah, so it's about peace and prosperity. And so I just like to point out, just it's important to me, no way I'm anywhere close to the levels of insight that my teacher had. I have things revealed to me now daily from conversations that I had with him over the years. And what was mesmerizing was having spent all those years in the corporate world and then spent all those years in the yogic world under his tutelage and guidance, I then get to the point, and he'd say to me, Greg, look, I don't need more people in ashrams who were just sat breathing and meditating and doing their yoga. That's all very good, he'd say to me, but we need people active in the world. I need you to get out into the world. And it's really interesting because when you've rejected corporate life, the last thing that you want is to be going back out into the world. you're like, no, I need to do my yogic thing now. And so, but the point arrives where I've got no money, I'm broke, and I'm like, okay, I need to do something. And I then speak to someone that both Nikki and I know. And I'm very calm at this point. I'm like, okay, I need to do something. I'm going to look at bringing my yogic skills to people. And I sit down with a guy called Aiden, who's a very young man. And if you imagine a young Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars series, then this is what Aiden is like. And Aiden says to me, okay, Greg, what you need to do is just make a list of the most influential people that you know. So I make a list of 5 people. He says, now you need to phone them and ask them what help do they need. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm in surrender. I've been practicing surrender for the last 10 years. I'm listening. And my teacher had told me, he said, you're going to meet a business group. And the business group that you're going to meet are quite like us. And what he meant was in terms of the community, and that there's going to be people in there who've got illuminated minds with regards to business. And he said, and you'll learn a lot from them. So I've got this playing in my mind, and I believe it is Aiden and it is Andrew. So then he said, so make the first call, and I phone up on the first call, and I say to this person, Greg here. Oh, Greg, how are you doing? I said, look, I'm just phoning. What are you trying to solve at the moment? How can I help you? And he's like, I'm so glad you phoned. And I'm like, what? And yeah. I'm so glad you phoned. We need help fundraising. And I don't know if you can imagine, I hear the word fundraising and I'm like, oh, get behind me, Satan. I can't think of anything worse. I'm coming off my yoga mat to fundraise. But I sort of calm myself down. Okay, calm down, Greg, calm down. And I let the piece settle. And then I say, okay, tell me more. So I then say to him, all right, well, I'm happy to look at this. You'll need to give me, I thought I'll put him off here. You need to give me 30,000 for the first 3 months so that I can look into everything that you've got going on and put my plan together. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. You can have the 30,000. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is surreal. So now I go back to Aidan. I said, all right, look, I've made one call. This is what I've found. Look, I feel I want to do my yoga. And he's saying, Greg, just give it a time. Bring your yogi skills to the fundraising. Just bring them together, merge them, to do that in some way. So counsel myself, and I then look at the proposition, and I'm like, okay, this is good. And I'm probably only a month in at this point. And I phone them and I negotiate terms then. And the terms that I negotiate are massively favourable to me. And when I fundraise, I get paid on the initial fundraise, and then I get paid what we call the back end when the business has been successful and it pays out, which is only a short turnaround. So I now...
So again, sorry for the detail here, but just to understand. So you're fundraising, am I right in saying you're fundraising for a startup business?
No, they're not a startup. So they're a business that's been established for 12 years. And they're in a particular part of the market where they need money to fund an arrangement. And I'll just give you the maths on the arrangement. For every £200 they spend, which includes all the costs, the OPEX, everything for the £200, they make 750. So if you can imagine like having a machine a fruit machine in your attic, where you put 200 in, hit the button, and every time 750 comes out. So it's the perfect business model from an investable point of view, because it's very transparent, it's easy to see, there's very few moving parts, and it is incredibly systemized. So it is like that, money in, action, 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 money out the back. So I don't really want to get into the market, if you like, because it can
No, that's fine.
throw
That's
us
fine.
open in other
Yeah.
ways.
So for people who are listening, how do we know at this point, or how do you know that it's not another one of the tax situations that you were in? So you're comfortable that everything is completely
Yeah, great question.
kosher.
Yeah, so the structure's been judicially reviewed at the highest levels in the UK. There's a 300-page recommendation document by the Financial Conduct Authority to legitimise this business. So this business is being signed off at all levels and is clear and transparent. So what I then do is I decide, right, I'm going to go and present this opportunity to 3 people that I know who could invest. So I've done my research, done my study. It's probably only taken me a month, not the 3 months. And I present it, and every one of them goes, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, okay, this is good. So then I train someone else, and they go out, and they are out of, say, 10 conversations, they get 3 yeses. And this is the proving stage. Does this work? So then I go to someone. Now I go up the league tables to someone who's a really big hitter, and I present to them, and they're like, "Oh wow, I really like this," because they kiss a lot of frogs and don't invest in much.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, I love this." Okay, they get their lawyer involved. They do their due diligence. They come to Liverpool. They go to the offices. They interview the directors. They go through it like a dose of salts. And then they immediately put 2 million in to the structure. Now, based on the terms that I've negotiated, that money is sufficient by the time the back end comes through for me to receive £1 million. So a combination of the front end and the back end gives me that payment. Simultaneously then, my involvement in the business is helping them to question and see things in different ways. And they then land a further 20 million of investment that isn't driven directly by me, but indirectly I contribute to that by me being in their orbit and influencing their lives. So that's fantastic. And then the person who's put 2 million in is now putting other monies in to the structure as well. And
you're getting a clip on all that.
All of it, yeah. And so I'm quite interesting, because the other day I said, what I can't. I've just got to sit here and collect the money. What more can I do? And that's pretty much it. I make a couple of texts on a Monday morning. Hi, how's everyone? Anything I can do? Answer back, no, it's all fine. Why? Because all the documentation's set up, all the processes are set up. But that's the miracle then, that people, because I wasn't directly expecting it to be this easy. I thought there'd be challenges and obstacles, and I thought it'd be another hero's journey. But for some reason, this has just been easy. And I believe it's that way for me because it is a miraculous occurrence. Because the me that has prepared over the last 55 years for this moment, it's 55 years of preparation that leads to this point, where this action and interaction takes place that leads to this. So you can look at it people can look at it in terms of how many months and you did what, and that is the case. Or you can look at it's a culmination of the entire story that leads to this moment.
Are you a good person, Greg?
So, interesting question. The answer is yes, I am a good person. And my teacher said to me, Greg, you will be remembered as a saint of business. And I'm like, okay, because he's obviously like he's used the Christian emphasis of the word saint. And then in terms of sainthood, we think about in Christianity, like it takes hundreds of years normally, although there's a young boy who's just recently been canonized. It takes hundreds of years in that tradition to become a saint. So I was always quite perplexed by it. I couldn't see it emerging because I was stuck in the yogic system, the corporate thing, I didn't want to go near again. So I thought, how's this ever going to materialize? And then sure enough, as this is now maturing, I'm able to give freely of my time in other areas and to other people because I've been rewarded by this. The old Greg, maybe 20 years ago, would have been like, right, I can make more. Right, let me do another one of these schemes. And people say to me, well, why don't you just replicate that? I'm like, well, why replicate it? Why destroy my balance? I'd rather stay in a state of balance, do this piece of work, contribute to other people. And actually, when I make the money, my plan is to open a retreat center and to help to nurture people with their yogic capabilities, or maybe just to calm themselves down, to get away from the egoic mind and to get into a heart center, which allows them to find balance, not just in their work, but in their family lives, in their social lives, so they don't need to navigate a path of destruction and devastation like the one that I did, or at least not unnecessarily. They might still choose to do it.
So you feel it. You feel a deep sense of responsibility to pay it forward, as it were.
Yeah, and most importantly, to keep polishing myself. So, when we said earlier, there's no such thing as toxic men, there's only unconscious men. It's to make myself more and more conscious through my daily practices and my daily activities. And then as I do that, that's the biggest gift and compliment I can pay to everyone. And then as I do that, as you say, to pay that forward to the people that I come into contact with. And I will have, at least half a dozen chats a week with people who are reaching out to me to say, oh, could you just help me with this? Could you support me with that? And I'm happy that this chapter, I'm more than happy to do that, to support people. And therefore, I don't see the receiving in a linear way. Oh, hang on, you want me to do this, therefore you need to give me something. It's like, no, the universe has just dropped this bundle on me. Yes, I've had to do my work. Yes, I had a set of skills that aligned with what the people needed, they were looking for. And we can look at all those elements as well. And I was able to deliver the value massively beyond what they expected. And the point that I was going to make in terms of be remembered as a saint of business, in the Indian culture, the word saint, and this was only revealed to me within the last 4 weeks, Nikki, so it's really fascinating. The word saint is ascribed to a person that is aligned mind, body, and spirit.
Oh, okay.
So someone who is a full human being is seen as a saint. And in a way, that really.
So Christianity
sense.
Yeah. So Christianity is picking up some tips from, picking up the lead from the yogic
I'd say
tradition.
So.
Yeah. Greg, in all of this, you sound like a man who's at peace with himself. You sound like a man who's been able to successfully marry the corporate and the mind, body, soul piece very harmoniously. Are you at peace with the Catholic religion and the Christian Brothers now? Have you been able to reconcile your experiences with where you're at today? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I see the chapter because what you got to remember is my parents were handing me over to the Christian Brothers every morning. So it's like, well, who's involved here? I'm under their care at that point as a young boy. So the ignorance and the stupidity, let's use it, and the word again, the unconsciousness the asleepness of the Christian brothers and my mother and my father was such that they would hand me over for them to teach me in the way that they taught me. And my mum would say to them some mornings, "Oh, this boy needs a good beating." So my gift to them was I was able to come into this lifetime and take on that role and say, in order to wake you up, you need individuals who are prepared to allow you to have the lesson that you need to have. And as you have that lesson, there's things that I'm blind to from in my past lives. There's debts that I've got that I need to work off. And I think, therefore, there's a synthesis that occurs, a synergy that occurs in all of these actions, interactions, and transactions. And that it is all perfectly weighted and measured. And I believe the blocking of my mind as a young boy who wasn't able to read until I was 11 was to do with the fact that I had too much logical capability in previous lives, and that would have hindered and hampered me in this life from finding the yogic path. I'd have made it all rational and logical, and I'd have cut off from it, because the yogic path requires the opposite. It requires sensitivity. It requires an expansion of ourselves. It requires a connection at the level of the heart beyond the egoic mind. And in this way, as we expand into ourselves, we begin to access deeper gifts. And in accessing those deeper gifts, we bring to life those latent potentials, which just create balance and harmony inside of us. So I can see the beauty and the mystery of the path. And I do feel at peace and reconciled with the various players that played parts on this path inside of this lifetime.
For those who would love to see this particular loop closed, are you now at a point where you might actually see the £1 million in your bank account?
Yeah, it's going to happen, definitely. And I'm also, though, because we need to be good planners. So I'm looking at other jurisdictions, other trust arrangements, so that at the point that those items become receivable, that I receive them in a way that allows me to, it's what's it called? It's called tax planning. It's only tax avoidance if you're doing something wrong. I plan to do everything correctly and right. And therefore, different countries offer different terms to encourage people to come and reside there. And as a consequence of that, give them favourable terms. So I'm exploring that, and I look forward to having the balance at that point. Yeah, there's also a responsibility that goes with it, Nicky, which is, it's like we're not to just sit on it, because I feel then we have to, like a farmer, there's no point me gathering the seed and then not replanting it again. So we have to replant it and keep it moving. Why? Because, I'm responsible for me leaving this place in a better place than when I found it, when my point of passing over comes. And just so people realise, I see passing over as the same as, look, you go to bed at night, you fall asleep, and then you wake up in the morning, you're back into your next day. It's just a longer version of that. People have made a lot of noise about it and try to create anxiety and anguish around it. It's challenging. Why is it challenging? Because the individual goes and they're separated from our senses for a period of time. And when they are separated from our senses, we're called to learn the holes that have been created by them leaving. We're asked to fill them for ourselves. And, that then, I think, allows for the mystery of life and living to be much gentler than the way that we, unkindly portray it to one another.
Yeah. This show is called Just Getting Started, and I'm curious to know if you feel like you're just getting started or otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe we're always just getting started. And there's a wonderful saying, which is festina lente, which is,
Yes.
hurry up slowly. And I'm getting started on understanding the rhythms, not rush. What they say, only fools rush in. And I spent, tens of years rushing in. And when we act from a place of festina lente, we slow down in order to then go much more quickly. Why? Because when we do that, we don't go off on detours, misdirection. We're not lost every 5 minutes having to retrace. And so when we slow down, we speed up. And it is like the tortoise and the hare, that we become more like the tortoise. And therefore, as we go slower, we enjoy the journey more because we do it in a state of balance. And so I'm just getting started with that. I'm sitting still for longer. I'm meditating for longer. I'm aligning mind, body, and spirit for longer. And I just need to keep polishing the diamond, the rough diamond. Just keep polishing it. And every day inside of our daily activities, that's what we're called to do. To just polish ourselves a little bit more so that by the end of the day, we're slightly brighter, not dimmed down by the experiences and challenges that life's given us.
Well, Greg Garrett, I had a feeling that this was going to be a fascinating discussion, and goodness me, I wasn't disappointed. It's been a rip-roaring yarn, and I'm taken by the energy of the conversation. You've taken us on a roller coaster, of energy, really, which is kind of a euphemism for your own life, perhaps. But I'm conscious now that the energy that we've got right now is very calm and very considered, which is in stark contrast to where we were an hour and 3/4 ago. And that is really interesting in terms of your skills and what you're able to bring, because we're in a group together where we're all learning and growing and building together. And you have as well as all of that, you've got a particular role which has been self-imposed, not self-imposed, but self-generated, in terms of being a guide, a leader, an influencer, a shoulder, a support person to a lot of people who are at a much earlier stage of their evolution than you are. And I think for those reasons, the work that you do is incredibly important and incredibly appreciated. And you, as you said earlier, are absolutely paying it forward to a lot of people that we both know who love you dearly. So I want to thank you for that. I know that you've also got your own group, your own community, which you're developing under your business name, which is Corporate Yogi, I understand. Mm-hmm. So how do people get in touch with you, or how do people join that movement, or how do they get closer to Greg?
Yeah, if anyone feeling called, then it's on the school platform again, which is www.schoolskool.com, and then to find my group, it's /transformation. And if you put that in, then you'll land at my community. It's free to join. And why would you want to join? Well, we meet on a Monday and I give a talk. Last night I did a talk on intuition. So instead of using the logical mind, how to access and use very practically our intuition. So, and then after the talk, we meditate. And with the idea being that we, on a Monday night, we work on our mindset. And if you sit down for long enough and think of every challenge that you've ever had in your lifetime, the root of it is in the mental landscape. And so when we can calm the inner landscape, calm the mind, then we find that we're going to be much more productive, much more fertile. And then as we take that into our business lives, we will reap the rewards over and over again. So come along on a Monday. As I say, it's free. And the other thing that I encourage people to do is to set themselves a constant target to go from 0 to 1. And what this represents is, what is the problem, if you see things as problems at the moment, or priority, which is the way the yogi sees things, that you most need to solve right now. And then come into our group, write it down, and then you will find there's people there to help you, there's resources, and then hopefully you can move from 0 to 1 really quickly, and then you design another one. Once we solve all of our 0s to 1s, well, as we solve them, those priorities just take us higher and higher and higher. And that's the main reason for being involved, because we want to get away from irritation, agitation, sadness, anger, fear. And we want to get to creativity, happiness, joy, love, peace. Well, we have to earn the right to that by going on this inward journey.
Great. Well, Greg, you personify, or you embody, the very essence of what this show is all about, just getting started. I want to seriously thank you for a wonderfully enjoyable conversation, and look forward to being in touch very soon.
Thank you, Nikki. Blessings. Yeah, thank you.